Welcome to the Data Vault Friday. My name is Michael Olschimke. I'm the CEO of Scalefree. We do this session here every Friday to allow you, the audience, to ask questions all about data vaults, cloud computing, big data processing, and so on. You could also ask MVP questions, because if there would be no questions at all, I would talk about the MVP cluster, and I made some slight progress at least. So it's my hobby project, it's a fun project, right? And yeah, all questions are allowed. If you receive multiple questions, and you could use all kinds of channels. You can use the chat here if you want to ask a question. You can use the Q&A here in this client. You can raise your hand for a live question, so just raise your voice. And you can also use a form I'm going to show you, well, the link at least, after today's session. Yeah, if we receive multiple ones, we would cherry pick, and it's time boxed roughly 10-15 minutes. So today, we received a question 1 or 2 weeks ago from a customer from the training, and essentially this is about the second part, and it's a real-time question, which is nice. We don't have them often, actually. So let me just share you the slide. It came via the form, so I had time to prepare the slide here, right? All right. So again, the client is using Kafka for CDC messages or CDC packages arriving at the data lake. In their case, they have an S3 data lake where these CDC messages arrive. And last time we discussed the preferred storage mechanism, or how to store these messages. And my suggestion was to just store these CDC packages as they are, arrive as a CDC package in a Avro file, essentially in a data lake. Just organize the data lake well. That's the goal. And then use some hybrid technique, hybrid SQL engine to query data out of the data lake into the raw data vault. Now, the second part is all about the order of these messages arriving, because they arrive in different partitions in Kafka, and they have to achieve the correct sequence of the data. Now, let's break this apart a bit into two different scenarios. Let's say we assume it's arriving at the data lake, but let's say this data is ordinary real-time data, not CDC, or it's CDC data. I give you both answers, right? If this would be a real-time question, not CDC, the first thing is, when you think about data vault, or yeah, an enterprise data vault with data vault, there's multiple timelines here at play. First of all, there's a timeline called the load date. That's essentially that indicates when we receive the real-time message in either the data lake, or well, in the first layer of our data warehouse. That could be the raw data vault, where you could stream the data directly into, or the data lake, one way or the other. I would typically, even for real-time messages in the scenario, what I would do is I would essentially split the real-time feed. I would load the data directly into the raw data vault. That defines the load date, but it would also split the record into the data lake, which means that the load date would be set when you split the streams, essentially, because that's when you have to set it. Now, that's number one. So there's a load date involved that indicates when we receive the real-time message. Then there's a business timeline involved inside the message. Let's say an invoice date or some timestamp from the source system. Then there's a snapshot date involved, another timestamp which is used when we deliver the information to the end user. A bit out of scope for today, but there's more timelines actually. When you think about Kafka, but any other real-time feed, doesn't matter if you're using SQS on Amazon, if you're using BizTalk and so on, doesn't matter. All these message queues, what they have in common is they have metadata. So like, for example, the queue name in SQS, for example, but also a timestamp. And Kafka, for example, I had to double check the documentation to be honest, but Kafka has a timestamp called ingestion time. Problem is, it depends on the Kafka version and configuration, what's being used, either the event time or the ingestion time. And my preference would be ingestion time, because the ingestion time, as many other of these times in other systems, is set when the message arrives in the Kafka topic. That's when the timestamp is added to the message, essentially, as metadata. And with many APIs for these message queues or topics, you can query out not only the message from the queue, but also the metadata around it, like the queue name and so on. And what I would do is, I would also always consider this metadata as source data in that sense. I would always capture it into the raw data vault. Now we got multiple timelines at play. If you would consider the Kafka topic here under your control, which means if something goes wrong, you can fix it, not the team next door, because they will tell you, well, yeah, it's a hotfix, and you get the hotfix within 3 months. But those 3 months, you can't load the database anymore, right? So if something goes wrong, so you must be able to fix it by yourself, or the team is assigned to you that kind of way, right? So it depends a bit on the organization. If you control the message queue, think about this. I just said a minute ago, the load date is defined when the message hits your infrastructure, or your first layer, I think I said. Well, if you consider the Kafka topic as part of your infrastructure or as part of your architecture, the real-time message, the first layer it hits in your data warehouse will be the Kafka topic, which means that the ingestion time is set when the message hits the topic, and that meets the definition. It's the same definition as our load date. So in this case, you could use the message date as the load date instead of setting a independent load date, essentially when the data arrives at the raw data vault or the data lake, whatever you design. Or you just keep both timelines, and that's my preference. I typically just keep the load date when the data arrives in my data warehouse, either the data lake or the raw data vault, and have and typically you want to synchronize that, and have the message date captured in some satellite or non-historized link and so on. That's how I deal with this, because then I can use that downstream for my business logic. I just use the message timestamp as any other timestamp from the source system for reporting purposes, for example, in my business logic, essentially. That's the idea. And that should also solve your question regarding CDC. The thing is, the CDC framework, and I forgot which ones you're using essentially, but the CDC tool that extracts the data from the source and offloads all these CDC packages to Kafka should add some either timestamp or CDC sequence to the package as essentially metadata from the CDC framework. This metadata I would also capture into the raw data vault. And then even if Kafka, because you have multiple partitions, even if Kafka messes up in the worst case, the order of the CDC package, wrangles it around, you still have the timeline or the sequence from the CDC package, and that's what you use downstream essentially. And the idea would then be later that you use a PRT table, because the thing is this: you want to have, let's say, a description, the latest description of the customer. But what is the latest? Well, that depends. Latest could be the latest record from the CDC package. So in your PRT design, in a loading process, you select the latest record of the satellite, essentially. But then it could be also, the latest could also be like the latest at 6 p.m. when we close the office doors, when we leave the office, that's the latest record. Everything that comes later will be considered for the next working day. If that's your definition, my next question would be what time zone, right? So it might really depend on the time zone of the user and so on. The cool thing is, once you have all the records in the right order in your raw data vault, the PIT table can then point to the right record used to be used for reporting, essentially. In the satellite, for the CDC data, in the training, we discussed essentially how we capture CDC data in the satellite. The idea is to extend or, well, use a standard satellite, not a multi-actor satellite, just use a standard satellite, but you slightly modify the load date of the satellite. Essentially, you for every record from the package by sequence, you add a microsecond to the load date. So only one record is active at a certain point in time based on the technical initialization of the load date. Only one record is active. Must be because it's a standard satellite, so there could be only one record per load date per hash key. That's your primary key, right? And so you just add microseconds to the load date, and that's it essentially. And then you have all the records in the satellite, and the PRT table will then cherry pick the one which is the latest, whatever that means. That's the basic idea. So there should be metadata in the CDC package that has been offloaded to Kafka. If not, talk to the CDC guys, because I've never seen a system where you couldn't turn it on. I saw some installations where they remove these metadata on purpose, but we always got it back essentially typically. That's what you want to have. CDC sequence or CDC timestamp. And for you, it's just descriptive data you capture in the raw data vault via the data lake, right? You capture it in a raw data vault and then use that for essentially loading a temporal pit table. That's what it is, where you cherry pick the delta to be used in reporting based on another timeline. That's a concept we discussed, all these timelines we discussed. Also the real-time trick actually with the message timestamp and so on. We discuss in in a new class actually called multi-temporal data vault 2.0 solutions, and that's essentially a extension to the standard bootcamp training. Essentially, we discussed business timelines and multi-temporal solutions up and down, all the way up and down. Yeah, so that's the idea. So just get the metadata either from the message queue and or from CDC into your raw data vault. You get more timelines that you can later use for the business logic essentially, or for the pit tables to activate the right records. That's how I would deal with that. And I hope it answers your question essentially. So yeah, good question though. And ping me here or raise your hand if you want to, if not, right? If you have a question like this, and I don't see anything popping up. Okay, so if you have a question like this, use this form here. Gives me some time to prepare the slides. Well, you saw the slide, it's just a text dumped into the PowerPoint, but it's good enough essentially for today's session. So the rest is me, right? The show is here, but use this form, it gets actually priority because I receive a lot of emails and I try to answer all of them as much as I can, but the Data Vault Friday form has priority. So if you want to get into this today's session, use this form, type in your question, give a little bit of background sometimes, maybe provide some drawings. If there's some drawings, I might add them to the slide as well if they have the right resolution and so on, right? Or I might cut them and so on. But yeah, the more you provide, the better it is. Add team pictures, that kind of stuff. And yeah, hope to see more questions coming up and hope to see you back next Friday, same time, same place, more or less. And yeah, the weather's picking up, so enjoy the weekend and see you next Friday. Thank you guys for joining. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining today. If you'd like to discuss this further, give us a call on the number below here, and we're happy to discuss this with you. See you next time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.